Welcome back to the Project Nomad. I'm Robert, and today we're working on another 80 series LandCruiser, and we are installing a Panhard Correction bracket from EimKeith. This is a simple weld-on bracket for the 80 series LandCruiser from EimKeith. This is a kit that is going to help correct your panhard angle and get your axle recentered underneath your rig after you lift it. So getting underneath the 80 here, it is actually pretty nice to be here because this thing hasn't been off-roaded all that much, so it's not too dirty down here. What we're looking at right now is a factory stock location for the panhard bar down here on the axle side, and here is the frame side, also stock. This is also a stock panhard bar down here. The game plan is to essentially by the end of today get the brackets welded up and get everything installed correctly so that my buddy here can drive home with his 80. So the actual game plan for today is to jack up the rear axle as high as I can so I can put jack stands underneath the 80 somewhere in front of the lower control arm mounts on the frame side and get it as high as possible so that I can remove the tires and then lower the axle as much as I can so I can pull out the springs. If that means I have to remove the sway bar brackets so I can get the coils out, I'll do that. I just don't want any splatter to get on the springs and actually mess them up. But also on the axle side, it is nearly impossible to get to the back end of the mount and not make contact with the ABS wiring down there. So my plan is to literally remove the coils for that reason so that I can get the access on the backside and get a very clean weld. So let's actually take a look at the mounts. This is the axle side mount, and there are two different kinds of axle side mounts that he has on his website. There is the flat top or the flat variant, or the V-notch, this variant. All you need to do is actually look at the axle and see which version you need. I'll show you in a second what you're actually looking for in order to know which one you're ordering. But this is the frame side mount, and this is pretty much universal for either of the kits that go in there. The kit also comes with a set of 2 new washers and a new bolt, because if you are using the axle side and you adjust it either up or down, you are going to need a nut on the back end because it is a welded nut on the back side of the original mount. So you'll need a washer and a nut to coincide with the bolt going through the new holes on these mounts. But let's actually go underneath and show you what you're looking for so you know which kit you're ordering. This is the axle side mount, and this is basically what you're looking for. On the back end, you're gonna see if it has a V-notch right here or if it's a flat top, because depending on which version of mount you have, you'll have a corresponding weld-on bracket. And in this case, we have a V-notch version. It'll just sit something like this and it will be perfectly fine here. And on the frame side, there's not really much of a variation, so it's all good to go. So let's get to removing everything we need to in order to actually get these things installed. Starting with jacking up this truck and removing these wheels. So I got everything removed, shocks down. Shocks are still in place because the owner had actually thought ahead and actually decided to go with 6-inch shocks or 6-inch lift shocks, which are perfect for an 80 with longer travel suspension. I did have to remove the sway bar, and everything else is off now. The panhard has been removed. I am just fitting up and trying to see where these mounts are gonna go. But here on the axle side, I did have to remove the ABS wire or the ABS harness here, and I am disconnecting or removing the brake line right here and just moving it slightly down, so that in the case that the metal is hot, I don't want it to melt through and damage some brake lines or have to deal with a melted ABS harness. I personally don't want to deal with that. Right now I'm just gonna get everything sorted here and mark off where I need to grind or just get a flap disc and clean up, and it's gonna be pretty easy for me to do this really quick. Here's the frame side of things. I have already did just a mark with some soap chalk and just marked off where I need to grind in order to get this thing to get a clean fit, so I have better adhesion when I weld. But yeah, this is actually pretty good. It's a very tight tolerance where it's a good friction fit, but it's not so tight where I actually need to just start banging on it with a hammer. I will have to put the bolt through so that if there's any thermal expansion or warpage, I'd like to make sure that this thing doesn't deflect or just start acting funny. Yeah, I'm just gonna get a flap disc and start grinding away and making sure everything else here fits. So I have the mounts cleaned up on both ends, the frame side and the axle side, and I do have the brackets already in position. I'm just going to put a bead on a few different positions so that this thing doesn't pull itself away from different sides when I start applying heat to it, and hopefully that nothing gets damaged around here. I'm going to be putting a lot of anti-splatter on everything around here, so just keep it safe. The battery is already disconnected now, and I'm just going to put the beads on or the tacks on and then start putting beads everywhere as much as I can, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Have the brackets all installed and all welded up. The axle side is fully welded on. This thing is not moving. Same thing with the frame side, everything is good. Do need to clean up all the flux core residue, but that's pretty much fine. But the owner is gonna have to deal with the painting of the bare metal and everything there. Other thing that they don't tell you or don't mention right off the top is that the ABS wiring harness right here actually needs to be tweaked a decent amount in order for this thing to fit back into its relatively safe spot, because this one went right over the Panhard bracket. But basically what I ended up doing was on the closer towards the caliper side, I almost bent the bracket almost a pure vertical and then proceeded to hammer out and use a screwdriver to bend it upwards and make it go along the shape of the bracket, so that in the event that we wanted to run the bolt through here, it's still clear and that there's enough room that the coil won't crush the harness. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of when installing these brackets. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I just thought I was just going to be welding it, but this is the largest modification you're pretty much going to do. Other than that, it's pretty easy to install and weld up. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to basically reverse the entire process by putting the springs in, putting the sway bar back in, and then getting it all back and buttoned up so that this 80 is ready to go. everything's pretty much back in order. The sway bars are in, the coils are in. I didn't have to remove the shocks, so they never got removed. Now it's just for me to install the actual Panhard bar now. But it came with new hardware. The 2 washers it comes with is for the lower bolt, or the lower bolt hole on the bracket that is installed, because it is wider than the factory bolts or the factory stock position, so it needs a little bit of a space or gap to center the Panhard. So that's what the 2 washers are for. So because this is a 3.5 inch lift, we're going to go with a 4 inch setting. What EimKeith said to do is the lower bolt hole on the frame side and the stock position on the axle side, and that's what I'm going to go with. We have everything installed back in place, including the tires, because we actually need to have this thing on the ground in order to get everything lined up with that Panhard bar. So what I'm going to do now is ask for some help to push the whole vehicle that way, and I'm just going to thread the bolt through the hole and hopefully it's all good. All right, I got everything installed and buttoned up all together. Coils in, sway bars in, everything's buttoned up. I also would recommend, if you have trouble putting in the axle side bolt, have someone help you shake it and about and apply pressure upwards if it's twisted, or twist it downwards if you have trouble with the bushings. But other than that, it's all set to go, and we're just going to take it out and see how it drives for a second. I didn't record the drive, but it did fix the axle being off-centered. It no longer had that crab walk driving down the road. But if you guys like this type of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, be safe and tread lightly.